you're also looking at Putin at the same time and saying, you have no intention of conquering Ukraine and overrunning Europe, right, Vladimir?
Now, I want to welcome to the program, warm welcome to Ambassador Gordon Sondland, who was President Trump's ambassador to the European Union in his first administration. Ambassador, good to have you here.
Nice to be with you, John. Boy, I'm hearing a lot of cynicism out there.
Do you think
in the UK today? Oh, yes. What Witkoff is trying to do on behalf of the Trump administration is a major grand bargain, and it has nothing to do with Ukraine. It has to do with the future of U.S.-Russia relations vis-a-vis China. Unfortunately, this incursion in Ukraine occurred under the Biden watch. I actually agree with President Trump. It would have never happened under his watch because he would never have allowed it. And now that it's happened, he's faced with a binary choice. Does he continue to surge weapons into Ukraine and take the gloves off and let Zelensky do what Biden would not let him do, and basically draw the U.S. into a potential nuclear war? Or does he reset the entire relationship and bring Russia closer to the U.S. to thwart the ambitions of China, which is really the game plan here?
Okay. Now, Ambassador, I do, take it from me, I do honestly try to resist any temptation to yield to cynicism. So maybe you can help me with that now. So let me ask you, first of all, Ambassador, do you, quite simply, do you accept Ukraine is a victim of a cruel and illegal invasion, which has seen thousands of Ukrainians tortured and killed and tens of thousands of Ukrainian children abducted? Do you accept all of that?
I do.
Right, so
but we are where we are where we are, and our choices are limited. And Trump could easily go back to Putin and say, look, I'm going to give Zelensky everything he wants. I'm going to let him use those weapons as they were designed to be used without restriction. And then lay out the scenario. Where are we at that point?
All right. Well, let's just see where we are. Steve Witkoff, who, of course, is the envoy now to in this conflict. Let's have a quick listen back for those who might not have heard it. Just a couple of extracts from Steve Witkoff speaking in a podcast to the broadcaster Tucker Carlson.
There have been referendums where the overwhelming majority of the people have indicated that they want to be under Russian rule. I thought he was straight up with me. It was enormously gracious for him to accept me. I don't regard Putin as a bad guy.
Do you think the Russians want to march across Europe?
100% not. There's a sensibility in Russia that Ukraine is a false country, that they just patch together in this sort of mosaic, these regions, and that's the root cause, in my opinion, of this war.
So, Ambassador, we hear there just some extracts of that conversation, and there is the U.S. envoy telling us that Vladimir Putin is not a bad guy. That the people in the occupied areas of Ukraine, they voted to be part of Russia, are telling us that there's no ambition to conquer Ukraine. You can see surely then, listening to that from the U.S. envoy, that it's maybe understandable that if Ukrainians feel they can't trust President Trump to protect their interests.
Well, they don't have a lot of choice. President Trump is the only one who can protect their interests.
I wonder what you make of Steve Witkoff's comments there, though, Ambassador.
Well, the irony is everyone believes that Steve Witkoff is this sort of naive rube coming out of the real estate business.
What did you make of what he said there, Ambassador? Because we heard it in his own words.
I think if anyone's manipulating anyone, it's Steve Witkoff manipulating Putin, not the other way around. Trust me. Putin knows exactly what would happen to Russia if Trump changed his mind and gave Zelensky carte blanche to launch attacks on Russia and gave him the equipment to do so. Putin knows exactly what would happen. And it would put Putin in the kind of corner that we would never want to see Putin in, which is a tactical nuke gets deployed. And then World War III begins. Trump has a much, much bigger game plan. It is unfortunate that Russia took the Biden signal of, a small incursion I might overlook. And Putin was smart. He took that as a signal. It was a signal. And he did exactly what Biden signaled him to do, which was to start with a small incursion. And now it's a big incursion. So now Trump is elected on January 20th. This has all already happened. He has some very, very big decisions to make. Does he want to exacerbate the problem, or does he want to turn lemons into lemonade? And that's what he's trying to do.
Okay, now do then.
I don't.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Do then, Ambassador, if you can, explain to me and to those listening who maybe could use a bit of explanation on this, do explain how simply parroting Kremlin talking points in the way that we heard there very clearly just a moment ago, how does that drive Putin to the negotiating table and to an early ceasefire?
I don't think the ceasefire is actually the real. I think the ceasefire is a red herring. I think, unfortunately, and I say this in all sincerity, unfortunately, there are going to be more lives lost while these conversations are ongoing, because I think the conversations have now escalated to much bigger stakes, and that is the future of the Russian-U.S. relationship and how that might influence activities in China, in Iran, and elsewhere. I think that's where we are right now. And I think, unfortunately, Ukraine is a pawn in that,
yes,
because the invasion already occurred.
Right. So you're telling me then, I think I understand you correctly. Tell me if I do not. You're saying the big game here, the main game, the thing we should focus on is the importance of separating Russia from China. Those twin threats need to be separated, and that is what is on Donald Trump's mind. And in that bigger game, Ukraine is a pawn. And when you say a pawn, in the chess analogy, it's a pawn to be sacrificed. And if Ukraine doesn't like that...
I didn't say sacrificed. I think that Ukraine's ultimate security and whatever the final agreement is on what real estate remains what is now Ukraine and what Russia gets to keep, I think those are very important negotiations. I'm not in any way suggesting that Russia should just willy-nilly be able to subsume Ukraine, and that's not what Witkoff is saying either. But unfortunately, it is unrealistic to think that we're going to do a grand bargain with Russia and at the same time ask Russia to give back all 5 of the territories, those that they haven't taken yet and those that they have: Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Some of those are still firmly in Ukraine hands. Some
yes.
of those are firmly in Russian hands.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that that's going to change.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now, or trying to look at it now from the point of view of Kyiv. And when they hear the envoy, the American envoy, telling them that effectively that Russia has no ambition to conquer Ukraine, no plans, no intention of invading and taking over Ukraine, they've only got to look back a couple of years when the Russian tanks were within sight of Kyiv. We know that was the case. The idea of saying that there's no Russian intention to invade and conquer Ukraine in that context, Ambassador, is surely simply absurd.
Well, but think about it. When you make a public statement that Russia has no intention of conquering Ukraine entirely or of overrunning Europe, which is essentially what Witkoff said, you're also looking at Putin at the same time and saying, you have no intention of conquering Ukraine
yes.
and overrunning Europe,
yes.
right, Vladimir? And if Putin's answer is, no, that's actually not right, I do have that intention, that changes the whole negotiation.
Yeah, but the idea that Putin is going to look anyone in the eye from the White House and say, yeah, it's my intention to conquer Europe and conquer Ukraine, well, that contention, Ambassador, is entirely absurd. Of course he's not going to say that, but his ambitions...
But what's absurd is that goes unsaid. Look, what's going to happen here is there are going to be some very, very substantive discussions taking place now between the U.S. and Russia about the Iran nuclear situation, about Gaza, and about, even more importantly, China. And if Russia wants the sanctions lifted, if they want to keep what they took in Ukraine, with appropriate guarantees that that's the end of that, there's no more territory, it's over, they're going to have to make some enormous concessions to Trump, which could include, as we in the real estate business like to say, an exclusive between Russia and the U.S. No more playing both sides with China. And that's going to be a huge ask of Putin, because he's going to have to cut ties in many ways. And that's going to happen, I think, over the next 6 months to a year.
Interesting.
But that is the grand bargain.
Okay, it's interesting and useful to hear your interpretation. I've just got time for one more question. If the course we are on leads us to the Trump administration easing sanctions on Russia, allowing them back into, well, significantly back into the trading and the financial markets, do you not believe that Russia would take that opportunity, rebuild its strength, rebuild its arms, its military, and then just go again in Ukraine as part of the project that's been underway for so long?
If you think Trump is stupid, which I do not, yes, I think that's exactly right. I think Trump is going to demand certain guarantees, number one, that will be enforceable by the U.S., both militarily and economically. But number two, beyond just the stick, the carrot will be irresistible, because the kinds of carrots that we can offer Russia pale in comparison, or I should say, whatever China is doing with Russia right now pales in comparison to what we can do together. And I think the most worried country in the world right now should not be Ukraine, it should be China.